AI agents stopped being a demo. They are now all business infrastructure. Anthropic just filed for the largest AI IPO in all of economic history, and the bubble talk has already begun. President Donald Trump signed an AI executive order just 2 days ago in which he named small businesses, and a new academic paper describes why rational business owners will automate themselves into a demand crisis, and unfortunately, they cannot stop it. So I don't know about you, but this week kind of hit me with that we're not in the quote, should I try AI phase anymore, but instead we are in the quote, are you positioned for what's already happening phase. And honestly, I think that's really exciting because if you're doing the work, then this moment starts to matter. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. So let's start with the infrastructure itself. I know yesterday when we were on the pod, we were talking a little bit about how you're going to start seeing a couple of companies, particularly acquisition companies, are going to start looking at the AI infrastructure of businesses that they're looking to acquire. So kind of want to start with that same idea. And we're going to talk a little bit about what are the ramifications when it comes to larger companies beginning to automate themselves and, of course, displacing a certain section or sector of the industry. But beginning with that infrastructure, we realized that 6 of the biggest technology companies on the planet just publicly agreed on what an AI agent is. And when you've got these companies like AWS, Google, Microsoft, even IBM, Databricks, when they're all saying the same exact thing in the same exact month, that's not just like a marketing strategy or something going on, but instead it's a signal about where these larger companies are wanting to set that floor. And obviously, when you start seeing these larger movements in these larger companies, these pivots that you're beginning to see from these larger companies, in particular these tech companies, you kind of need to know what that also means for your business, because your business is going to be continually pulling in more technology. And obviously, that technology is going to be impacted by what's happening at the higher levels of the economy with these larger companies. So kind of understanding what is that signal that these larger companies are trying to move towards when it comes to how they define an AI agent and what that means for you as a business owner, medium-sized, small business, whichever one it is. So mentioned at the top of the show that AI agents are no longer a demo, but are now being incorporated into this business infrastructure. So when you heard that these larger companies, AWS, Google, Microsoft, Databricks, BCG, when they all agree about that, what does that actually tell you about where we are in regards to the AI revolution? So just a couple of things to mention. It was just released in June that all major platforms are converging on the same agentic autonomy or anatomy. And those are those big companies I mentioned, in which they framed by analysts that June 2026 is going to be known as the month in which which part of my business or operations can get agentic workflows, or agentize is what they call it, first. So one of the statistics that was mentioned in this MIT paper was that 95% of generative AI pilots failed to deliver measurable ROIs. So it wasn't that the models weren't actually working, but it was more of the models weren't working in a system that was going to provide a significant ROI in the first place. And that's one thing that I keep hitting on, and one thing that I find kind of irritating when it comes to people who are claiming AI investment. I mean, everyone knows about that meme where they are talking about you have all these different business owners or CEOs, and the meme says, what do we want? And they're all like, AI. And they say, what do you want it for? Or when do we want it? And they go, now. And then they say, what do we want it for? I don't know. And that's kind of the same thing that I'm starting to see when it comes to these investors. Like, they want AI, but they don't necessarily know how it's supposed to be implemented. And that's kind of the same thing that you're seeing here, is that 95% of these generative AI pilots fail to deliver measurable ROI because they didn't know how to implement it into the system in the first place. So it's not the issue that the models are the issue, but it's actually the governance and the implementation failures, going back always to systems. So some of these quotes that were popping up, agents are just no longer fancy chat tools. I think that's just something that we have to begin to realize, is that your agents, the ones that are on your computer, the ones that are running your code, they're no longer fancy chat tools, but are actually becoming what they would consider, these larger companies, a software layer that handles real work across real support, across real sales and research, and doing all of that for your small business. So I would imagine that if you are a small owner or a business owner or a medium sized one, when they start investing into these new technologies, it's a signal that you should probably also look into investing into these technologies. So a 2025 study from MIT's NANDA initiative, so this was that report I was talking about earlier, said that 95% of these AI pilots failed to deliver measurable ROI. Like I mentioned, it was because of the fact that there is no system in place, or that the system was just not being as efficient as it could have been. So if your so-called agent cannot save me time on a messy Tuesday with missing data and, shifting priorities, it's not a business agent. It's just another way of propping up your business as like, oh, we are adopting AI. I think this goes back to another report that I remember reading, which is it was saying that 88% of small businesses claim that they use this AI adoption, but only less than 10% of them actually implemented AI workflows. So they have AI integrated in their system, but they don't necessarily say that they're using it. They're not always chatting with an AI agent, right? But the AI agent is doing work for the business. And that's kind of the way we need to look at it. We don't want to necessarily be interacting with our agents all the time. If you think of it this way, imagine if it's an employee. It's good to interact with your employee, granted, but there might be days where you don't have to interact with them at all, but they're still doing work. So it's the same kind of idea, is that you don't always have to interact with your AI agent for it to do work, but at the same time, you just want to make sure that it's doing its job. So the 95% failure rate that was mentioned in that MIT report, that was the headline, and it's genuinely not a problem that's happening with the tool. It's that systems problem that we always mention. Right? Every one of those failures is a business that grabbed a tool thinking that the tool was going to save them, but they didn't end up actually figuring out, where is our AI technology going to end up? If we work from the end goal, so let's just say, for instance, we want to get more clients into the door, right? That's just a very simple type of example. We want to get more clients into the door. Okay, what are some of the ways we can get clients into the door? We can use paid ads. Okay, that's number one. We can use emails. Okay, that's number two. We can use automations. Okay, all right, that's number three. Automations. What type of automations are we talking about? Oh, you might have inbound automations where if someone texts you on your Instagram profile or someone texts you on your Facebook profile, right, we can have an automated text that responds to them. All right, they're in the door, first step in the door. Or we can even have a voice AI agent, right, that can handle inbound calls, right? So that's kind of the focusing on the end goal, right? What's the end goal? Okay, what are the ways to get into that end goal? What are the problems that are preventing us from getting to that end goal? Now that we know what the problems are, we can figure out whether or not the problems that are not necessarily problematic but are necessary, maybe some of those can be useful, something to integrate AI into. So quite frankly, if you are a 5 to 50 size company, you have a lot more to gain from bringing in AI agents into your business than these larger enterprises, because you have fewer levels of bureaucracy to get through. Right? You have fewer levels of bureaucracy to get approved. And more importantly, you have fewer people to absorb all of the administrative drag, because, if you have more people doing admin work in a small business or in a small company, well, if you can move admin work over to an agent, that would save your team a lot of time. So, but that's only possible if you've built a system underneath that is clean enough for you to hand off to an AI agent. So make sure that you get your system right, obviously. But then keep in mind that there are certain parts of your business that you can delegate to an AI agent. And one thing I want people to make sure that they don't mess up or they have the wrong perception of is that evaluating agents by the quality of the demo isn't always the right way of looking at it, because the demo is almost always good. You're not looking at it implemented in the actual grind of the business. So the failure happens first when the agent hits an edge case that the consulting firm who gave you the agent didn't end up showing you, because it's a caveat. If that filter is, does this type of agent impress me? It shouldn't be that. It should be more of what happens when all of a sudden we get 500 clients or 500 vendors giving us a bunch of different information, or, all of a sudden we receive multiple emails. Some of them are bugs. All of those extra things might play into whether or not your agent is going to work. And that's where it takes human adaptability, right? If the answer is if it breaks and someone has to manually clean it up, you haven't truly gained any capacity or any increased capacity in implementing AI, and you just added another dependent technology to your business. So make sure that your system is in place first. Make sure that all of the things coming into your business, going out of your business are standardized and have a precise way of getting from A to point B. And then you can start bringing in your AI agents. So think of it not as a business agent. If you have a broken system in your business and you want to bring in an AI agent into it, it's not an AI agent. It's just another cool piece of technology that you pulled on because you didn't actually build out a lasting system. So now, before we talk about how to implement any of this, let's just go ahead and talk about what's happening at the very top of the stack, because the company that a lot of you might end up using, I know everyone says that they use Chat GPT. If you're one of those guys, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but if you do, let's talk about Anthropic, because that's the company that makes the tool that a lot of you are already using. For some of you who don't know, they just filed to go public at a valuation that should probably make you stop and ask, am I building my business on top of this really valuable, tremendously growing at a fast rate type of company? And if the answer is no, well, I think you should probably start looking into Anthropic and maybe start bringing it into your workflow. So this gets us to some news that actually happened 2 days ago, or I believe on June 1st, where Anthropic just filed for the largest AI IPO in history. And the talk about AI bubble has already begun. And everyone always wants to talk about how there's always an AI bubble. Granted, okay, cool. But, I think one thing to think about, they drafted their S1. S1 is just like a private way of registering your company for a public release. Just something that they submit to the United States SEC for a proposed initial IPO for common stock. So they're just needing to review it. They're working with analysts, making sure that they're properly pricing it right before they bring it public for the public offering price. And the IPO right now, from what we are seeing in regards to the news, is that according to Fortune says that right now Anthropic has a $965 billion valuation at the time it's filed for that IPO. So they haven't disclosed any share prices, any numbers of shares that they're going to plan on selling, not just yet. All of that, of course, depends on demand, depends on the market, what the market is willing to ingest. And quite frankly, I think one thing that we can say is that AI has become very profitable. According to Fortune.com, Anthropic is moving towards going public on Wall Street, which is the latest chapter of its meteoric rise from that very little known research laboratory to one of the top leading AI companies that are now valued at $965 billion. Leaders from Anthropic said that they submitted a confidential filing, which is that Form S1, with the US SEC for a proposed IPO offering of its common stock. They keep going on to say that Anthropic said last week it had raised $65 billion in private funding that will push its valuation to $965 billion, a whopping number that makes the 5-year-old maker of the Claude chatbot one of the most valuable startups in the world. And then I think one of the craziest numbers that we have to read is this 47 billion, where it says Anthropic said it's now making an annualized revenue of 47 billion from selling its technology to people and organizations using Claude to write code and to do other work and personal tasks on their behalf. 47 billion ARR. That is how much AI, in particular, just a section of AI, is making from just simply selling its technology to people and organizations, right? So if you're not seeing already the value that AI is bringing, if you're not able to see that, then, I don't know what you're looking at, because there is so much signal, there's so much movement towards bringing AI into business. And if this thing is valued at $965 billion in an IPO, that's a lot of money that's on the table, which means that there's a lot of opportunity for investment, which also means that there's a lot of opportunity for innovation and growth when it comes to the types of technology that these companies are going to be releasing and these type of products that these companies are going to be releasing, especially whenever it comes into the public market. because now all of a sudden you're going to have a lot more input on what gets developed. What gets developed on the enterprise level, obviously, and how that translates down to your everyday user of these AI models, of these AI tools, of these AI systems. And thankfully, Anthropic has been one of the most secure companies when it comes to privacy of its data, security of its models, and all of the good stuff that you would want whenever you have a very centralized artificial intelligent agent reading through all of your data. So yeah, 65 billion in private funding. And this number, like I mentioned, 47 billion. That's something that they announced. Oh, this is how much more money we're getting just simply from selling our product. I'm a Claude user. Right? I'm a Claude user. If you use Claude, you put a part into that 47 billion, which is an insane amount of just how profitable this type of technology is. So in an official statement that Anthropic released on June 1st, it said that today Anthropic PVC confidentially submitted a draft registration statement on Form S1 to the US SEC. So this gives us the option to go public after the SEC completes its review. And top analysts, unfortunately, from my standpoint, I say unfortunately, top analysts see the opening of the floodgates for the IPO market after Anthropic's filing as the dot-com bubble comparisons fly. So everyone is saying that, oh, this is going to be another dot-com bubble. Where's the money actually going to end up? Are we actually going to see an ROI? Everyone's going to be throwing a bunch of money into it. They're going to overinflate the value of the stock, and then all of a sudden everything is going to crash. I don't think that's the way it's going to be, because quite frankly, from just how highly valued Anthropic is, just from the profitability standpoint of just how much money it's making in revenue and how much value users are getting just simply from a chatbot, and also for the people who are actually bringing it into their business, I don't think that there's going to be a dot-com bubble, pop, burst, whatever you want to call it. So my take is that trillion-dollar valuations end up not validating the tool for your business, right? I wouldn't say that just because Claude is a $1 million company, multi-billion dollar company, they don't validate whether or not the tool works for your business, but instead the market, right? Not the market, not the workflow, not what you're building it on. So the question that you honestly should be asking, great, if you want to invest into Anthropic, if you want to buy their common stock when it does go public, kudos to you, that's what you want, you can do that. But the real question is whether or not the system that you're building for your business, for your operations, for your workflow, for your team, if you're a business owner, for your team, if you're a manager of a team, anyone who has at least some exposure, if you've built your system around Claude, and if that's worth putting your trust in it, right? So if you have a problem, so if you're only relying on one thing and that one thing crashes, what's your backdrop? What's the thing that you're going to back up into? What is your safety net? Because if you're a bookkeeper in Tulsa and you're paying $20 a month for Claude, you should probably understand what the capital stack underneath that tool actually looks like. You should probably understand, what type of servers is it built on? What type of models is it built on? What type of investment are we seeing into it? Because that shapes how long the tool will exist and what features are going to get prioritized, and whether or not access to this tool stays affordable. One scary story that I was seeing was how much money we're actually spending when it comes to token usage, because it costs a lot to run AI because of the amount of demand. But the supply for power is so limited. So you know what that means? Obviously, it means that the cost might go up. And what I think people are going to get wrong is that they're going to treat this IPO filing as something to get excited about when it comes to AI as a category for investment. But it's not a signal about any retail investor returns, right? It's not about you as a retail investor, what type of returns you're going to get when you invest into this company. Albeit, if you're a retail investor, I wouldn't want to be a retail investor. I would rather just leave investment into these companies up to the people who create the ETFs and the mutual funds. I would rather leave it to them because they're more knowledgeable in it. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. But it's this signal that the first wave of AI infrastructure companies are now large enough that their exits need public markets. So what matters now is who's going to handle the development of these AI tools, of these AI models. And that is going to play a big role in understanding, okay, what's the price going to be for this stock? More importantly, what's the quality of these services? Especially when we start seeing, okay, it's no longer private investors, but now public investors. What's happening in the market? Is there a demand for it? Is there not a demand for it? And that's what you're going to start seeing. You're going to start seeing that impact your wallet, because maybe you might end up paying more. You might end up paying less. I don't know. Only time will tell. but that's just the way to think about it. And that's how it's going to impact your business. Because if you're investing into AI, if you're bringing AI into your business, the things happening within the market that are affecting your Anthropic subscription, that are affecting your tools that you're using, those are going to impact how your business runs if you're building your entire system, your entire business on these tools. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, something that everyone always says. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I like using Claude a lot, but I also have technology. I also have systems that I've invested into with other companies like OpenAI. I built my systems around those. And it's an easy switch if you ever have to do it, right? So be proactive. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So while the private sector is raising trillions of dollars, the government, the federal government, signed an executive order just 2 days ago, and that put small businesses directly in the conversation, not as targets, but as named beneficiaries. And here's exactly what it means for you. So 2 days ago, President Donald Trump signed an executive order, and it was titled on June 2nd, Promoting Advanced Artificial Intelligence, Innovation, and Security. So in this executive order, he set up a 30-day deadline. So by July 2nd, he's going to have an AI cybersecurity clearinghouse, which is led by the Treasury, and it must be operational. And then he also has a 60-day deadline in which voluntary framework for pre-release government access to frontier models must be finalized. And guess what he named as all of the beneficiaries of this? The beneficiaries are going to be rural hospitals, community banks, and local utilities. So Section 4 of this document directs the Attorney General to prioritize enforcement against anyone using AI agents unlawfully to access data. So this is this shift that you're seeing from the federal government to make its systems a lot more efficient and to speed it up, basically, with AI. So there was a fact sheet that was released that accompanied the executive order. And in it, it was saying that as AI capabilities increase, the new cyber and national security considerations emerge that require coordinated action between the federal government and the private sector. So here it is, promoting advanced AI innovation and security. Right here. It is the policy of the United States to promote AI innovation and security by working collaboratively with the private sector to modernize government and private sector information systems and harden them against external threats to protect American ingenuity and intellectual property from exploitation and theft by adversaries, and to cultivate America's advanced enabled capabilities. So, in other words, you're seeing that, once again, that shift of federal government, more in particular, the American government, is wanting to run more efficiently. So it's going to bring AI into how it does its work, essentially. We need AI to make government more efficient, is what you're seeing. And that's a signal that I think should not be overlooked, because obviously you're starting to see a signal in the market where Anthropic filed for its IPO and it just needs to be reviewed and approved by the SEC. But also you're seeing the government investing into AI. So what does that mean? It means that for you, that you probably should look into investing into AI as well. Not because everyone else is doing it, but it's because there's a shift happening. There's a signal that is being transmitted, which is AI is not going to leave. It's going to be something that's integrated into everyday life, your government, your local mom and pop shop, coffee shop, whatever it is that you go to on a day-to-day basis. They all use AI because you get data, you get sales, there's sales data. There's so many things that AI will be used for to help businesses run more efficiently. And it's not just from a sales perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, from an efficiency perspective, right? There's going to be something that's applicable at every stage of the industry when it comes to AI. It's just a matter of when that sector of the industry is going to be exposed to it. So what does that mean for you in the next contracting cycle? If you're a contractor or if you're a business owner or if you're a medium-sized one. So one thing that you should note about the EO is that it specifically named rural hospitals and community banks and these local facilities as eligible beneficiaries of federally facilitated tools and services, potentially including your covered frontier models. So the message is kind of clear in this case. Good governments don't fund infrastructure that has no value. There you go. I'll just say that. That's a better way of putting it. Because when a federal government order names your hospitals, particularly rural ones and community banks, as beneficiaries, the message is then how AI adoption for these service businesses is no longer just something that is optional, an optional infrastructure. It's no longer just, should we invest into AI? But now it's hey, we should invest into AI. Where are we going to put it in? Because it's becoming the standard, or it's becoming the standard for municipalities. It's becoming the standard for the federal government. It's becoming the standard for your state governments, your state and local ones. And it's especially becoming the standard for the private sector. So the businesses that have a system always goes back to the system. My mom even understands this. My mom, who runs her own nonprofit, says that AI is just a tool. It is. It really is just a tool. It's another form of technology that is tremendously changing the way we view technology and tremendously changing the way we interact with it. But at the end of the day, it is just a tool. So what does that mean? It means that the tool is never the problem. It's the system that tries to pull the tool in. Because if the system doesn't need that tool, or if the system isn't running properly, how is the tool going to fix that? So it's the same way, is that the businesses that have the system to absorb these new tools will benefit. And the ones that don't have a system will find that the tool that they end up bringing in, the AI, no one's going to be able to use it because they don't know how to use it. They don't know where in the system to use it. That's why, once again, it's a systems problem. Fix the system. And I promise you, don't just voluntarily hop into AI. Think of it as like, oh, it's a standard now. It needs to be implemented one way, shape, or another, right? And I think what we're seeing from this executive order is that you're seeing a push by the federal government from a national, of course, they claim national security and placing guardrails of American innovation and all that. Granted, okay, he has to say that. Whether you believe that AI will help or not, with regards to efficiency, federal efficiency, governmental efficiency, and also whether or not you believe that it would actually help national security, that's up to you. But what you are seeing is that there is a shift, even by the federal government, that local governments, local governmental institutions, hospitals, community banks, this gives them access to these tools, not implementing them, but gives them access. So they're setting the stage for this next phase of the AI revolution, which is no longer discovery. We're no longer discovering the usage of AI, right? We now know where it should be. It's just a matter of implementing it. The market is now converging at the same time as the government. They're all seeing the same thing. AI is starting to make a shift. There's a paper out, and I mentioned it, from the University of Pennsylvania and Boston University, that gives the mathematical explanation. So if you were on the call yesterday, I talked about this paper where I was mentioning how one of the conclusions that they came up with was that if you begin to cut human capital, cut your resources, and cite AI as the reason for it, because you're replacing human capital with AI, the firms that are doing that are creating a demand crisis, because now they're removing a section of the workforce from the economy, which means that the demand for consumer products, services that firm is offering, it basically is biting them in the foot. So what this paper was saying from UPenn and Boston University was that in 2025, U.S. employers announced 1 million job cuts, in which 55,000 were cited due to AI. The sectors of that 55,000 that were removed were from customer support, content moderation, and middle management. And you see this also at the beginning of this year, where Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, from his company, Block, cut nearly half of the 10,000 person workforce that he had, citing AI directly. And then according to another paper, it says 80% of US workers hold jobs that have tasks that are exposed to these LLMs, meaning that 80% of the workforce is exposed to AI. So what does that mean? It means that higher AI productivity widens the wedge rather than solving it. What does that mean? It means that you're making the problem a little bit bigger, because now you're reducing demand and you're pulling people out of the decision-making process. That's what it means. It means that if you start removing more than you can reabsorb, there's a demand crisis. So the most significant AI-driven workplace changes can emerge. This is what it's saying in the Time magazine, can emerge in small companies, which can learn how to reorganize around newer technologies a lot more quickly. Because what you're seeing from these larger companies is that they are cutting workforces, citing AI directly. And what that means for you is that, okay, if these companies are just cutting people, does that mean I, who run a 5 to 50 person firm, does that mean I need to cut? No, it does not mean you need to cut. It actually means that, hey, there are people that I can hire, that I can bring into my business, but the only way I can do that, bringing them more people into my business, is if I can build systems that allow me to bring in more people. How do you do that? Well, you start making AI, an AI responsibility, something that's standard within your company. How do you do that? Well, you have to start looking at where AI can be implemented. Because once your team can then be amplified, once your team can start doing more higher value added tasks, because they have these AI systems in place, you could probably start pulling in more people. And those are the companies that are going to emerge because they understand how to reorganize quickly around you are more adaptable to these new technologies because you have less bureaucracy to go through. And that's the most interesting thing. It's not that there's an arms race when it comes to AI. It's more of that if you're a business built around AI to complement human capacity rather than replace it, you will have more to offer into an environment that is continually losing people, right? You will have more to offer in services because you're getting more clients in through the door because you've got more time for your employees instead of the typical thing that we're constantly seeing in the news of this company cut this many percentages of people from the workforce, like Meta. Instead of the companies that decided to hollow out their companies because they just see every human employee as just a number, right? Instead of those companies, your company, which understands that we can build upon human capacity, we can build upon human intelligence using AI, you guys will have more to offer. So I would encourage to not read the idea that AI replaces human intelligence or AI replaces human efficiency. The argument that the paper is making is addressing the long run. And what it says is that during the transition, the period that we are in now is this transition of how we are beginning to understand what it means to bring AI into a business. It doesn't mean cutting the workforce. This is the transition period where you're going to see companies, two different types. Replacement, you're going to have replacement, and you're going to have amplification, amplifying the workforce, increasing more value. You're going to have ones that focus on how can we take this tool and leverage it so that our workforce can do even more, can be more efficient, can be more productive. And in this transition, that is where those types of businesses will survive and eventually flourish once we get past it. So every story that we talked about today points at that same thing, is that the infrastructure layer that is being decided right now, all of the platforms that we've seen, your big tech companies, they all agree on what AI agents are. They all agree on what they are used for, their business infrastructure. That's what we're talking about here. Capital markets agree too. They're pricing AI right now at a level of $1 trillion. And the federal government is also shifting in that same signal because now they even put small businesses and even local institutions into a policy conversation. The local rural hospitals, your community banks, your local utility companies, right? All of those are going to be encouraged to use AI. And really all we see here in that research paper is that it's just showing you that businesses treat this tool as an adoption decision. If your company is struggling, AI is not going to solve that. If your company is struggling, it's a systems solution. To make you run more efficiently, it's a system solution plus bringing in AI. It's not the tool. Go to the system first. Make sure that the system works, then bring the tool in. Because that's always the answer. It's always a systems solution. It's never an AI problem. It's a systems one. So once again, that's all we got for today. We're going to be talking a little bit more about some of the other news that we're seeing in the AI space tomorrow. But yeah, always focus on your system, map out your workflows. If you're wanting to get started on that today, check out the AIminimalist.co. And as always, keep building. I'll see you tomorrow.